Last week we had posted a poll, and the poll was to gather data on everyone's favorite fruits. So we had fruits like apples, blueberries, bananas, and whatever your favorite fruit was, you would have voted for that fruit. So the reason that we had that poll up is because this week we're going to be going over graphing. And whenever we're going over graphing, your first step for graphing is to gather your data. So we got everybody's votes in, and now we have our data. Let's go ahead and post our data up. If we looked on our poll, number one with 7 votes was apples. And then we had grapes with 6. Pears and blueberries were tied with 3. And then oranges and bananas were both tied with 1. So now that we have all our data that we gathered over this week and the weekend, we can go ahead and make our 2 types of graphs. Our first type of graph is going to be a pictograph. And our other type of graph that we're going to be making today and the rest of this week is our bar graph. So a lot of people want to ask, why do we make graphs if we already have our data? And the reason why we make a graph is so that you can see your data in a better way, and it's easier to look at, it's easier to compare, it's easier to count. So let's get started with your bar graph. Most people are familiar with a bar graph. It's one of your most common graphs. Whenever you're making a graph or a bar graph, you start with what's called a y-axis. The y-axis goes up and down like a column. And then you have your x-axis, which goes side to side like a row. So now that you have your y-axis and your x-axis, let's go ahead and label starting with your y-axis. For your y-axis on this bar graph, let's go ahead and put the numbers. So you always want to start at the bottom in the corner, and that would be 0. So if your bar was at this level, it would have 0. And then making even spaces in between your numbers, let's start counting up. And for our graph, we're going to have to go at least to 7. So let's go to 7 on our bar graph this time. So 1, 2, 3. And if you notice, I try to keep my spacing in between my numbers equal. Because if I had spacing like this, then my bar graph isn't going to look good. Because if I had 1, it would look like that. And then 2. But then if I had 3, it looks way bigger, even though it's just 1 more. So we can't do a bar graph like that. You need to make sure that your numbers on your axis are as equal as you can. And then let's go over to your y-axis. For your y-axis, we're going to have to put the names of each fruit. So starting, instead of putting the whole name, since we don't have a lot of space today, let's just go ahead and put the first 2 letters. So let's put AP for apple. And then GR for grape, and we'll go ahead and do the rest. All right, now that we have both of our axes made, let's go ahead and label our axis. This is another important part of graphing. You put your information on your axis, but you need to make sure that you label it. So labeling it is not a hard step, you just have to remember it. What we're doing down here is names of fruits. And then on our y-axis, we'll just put the number of votes. So let's use our number sign. Number of votes. So now we only have one more thing to do, and that would be to put your title. So your title's not going to be bar. I just had bar because it's a bar graph. Your title is going to be what you gathered your data from. So the data that we were gathering were, you were looking at people's favorite fruits. So the title of our video should be Favorite Fruits. So now we have our whole graph labeled. Everything looks good. We can go ahead and actually put the data onto our graph. So let's start with apples. Apples, we know, are going to go up to 7. So let's make our bar up to 7 using our ruler or your meter stick. Grapes up to 6. So put your ruler on 6, make your horizontal line, and then come down with it. And then let's go ahead and do the rest. Now, if you wanted to, you can go ahead and color in your graph, but you don't really have to on this. It would make it look really nice if maybe you did your apple in red and your grape in purple and then your pear in green. But that's just to make your graph look better. So right now our graph is complete, and let's move on to your pictograph. All right, let's go over your next type of graph. And if you remember, the next type of graph is a pictograph, not a picture graph, but a pictograph. So your pictograph is going to share a lot of the same things that your bar graph had shared. It's going to have a y-axis. It's going to have an x-axis. It's going to have the same information on each axis because we're going over the same type of data. It's going to even have the same title. So let's get rid of pictograph and let's put our title. If you remember, it was favorite fruits. All right, same thing. Let's put our information on our y-axis. On our y-axis, we have numbers. Let's do numbers again this time. And then on our x-axis, let's go ahead and put the names of our fruit. This time, let's mix it up. Instead of having it in order, let's put it in, we'll just mix them all up. We'll still start with apple, and then let's go blueberry. All right, and then if you remember, our last step that we're missing is to label that axis, and then we'll go ahead and put our data onto our graph. So this axis, we're looking at names of fruit. And then on our y-axis, we're looking at number of votes. All right, now we got all our numbers, we got our names of the fruit, we got our labels, and we have our title. We can go ahead and make our graph. So starting with apple, let's look at how many votes apple had. It's the same data. Apple had 7 votes. Now this is where a pictograph differs from a bar graph. A bar graph, you're making bars. A pictograph, you're making a picture to represent an apple. So you're not actually drawing an apple. For this graph, let's just go ahead and make circles. So each apple is going to be represented by a circle. So 1, 2, and we'll go up to 7. And then let's go to blueberry with 3. Now if you notice, on our pictograph, we're trying to keep those circles the same size. You don't want to have, let's go ahead and go to orange. Let's pretend we went to orange. You don't want to have a little circle for orange and then a big circle for blueberry, because that makes it look like that orange's vote didn't count. What if you're the person that voted for orange and now your vote, you got a little circle for your vote? You wouldn't be happy. So let's go to orange. Orange got 1. Grape is up there with 6. Banana with 1, and then pear with 3. All right, our pictograph looks good. We're gonna keep this graph up here, and we're gonna go over our questions for our data with this graph. Tomorrow we're gonna keep that bar graph up there, and we'll go over our data with our bar graph. All right, now let's go ahead and answer. You got 5 questions. Pretend this is a test, and we're gonna be answering those questions using the data that we had put on our graph right here. So these are easy questions if you did your graph right. Your first question is which fruit had the most votes? So all you do is look on your graph, you go on to who had the highest amount, and that would be apple with 7 votes. So which fruit had the most votes? Easy answer, apple. Now let's go on to number 2. Which fruit had the least votes? Now looking at your graph, you have 2 fruits with only 1 vote. You don't just put one of them. You go ahead and put both orange and you put banana. So both of those fruits would be your answer. So banana and orange. All right, 1 or 2 are done. Those are easier questions. Now let's go on to number 3. Number 3 is looking at what is the difference of apple and blueberry. And if you remember from early on in the year, difference always means the answer to a subtraction problem. Sum would mean the answer to an addition problem. Difference, answer to a subtraction problem. So difference of apple and blueberry, whenever you're subtracting, you want to start with your larger number. Your larger number in this case would be apple with 7 votes. So you go 7, and then blueberry with 3 votes. 7 minus 3 equals 4, and your difference would be 4. If you look at it this way, you can see why it's called difference. Because apple, they both have 1, 2, 3. Your difference is where apple has 1, 2, 3, 4 more than blueberry. That's your difference. So your answer for number 3 is 4. Number 4 is one that's on a lot of tests like your EOG. And it says how many people voted. This is an easy one. You just have to keep up with your counting. So anytime you're looking at how many people voted, you want to count up all your votes on your graph. Or you could look back at your data, but for today, let's look back at your graph since we're going over graphs today. So you already know Apple has 7. So from 7, let's just count on by 1 so we don't get confused. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 people had voted in our poll. And then your last question. This is a question that's not hard if you use your brain and you're not rushing through your answers. If pair had 2 more votes, how many votes would pair have? All you do is go to pair. All right, I see pair has 3 votes. If it had 2 more, that would be 4, 5 votes. That's how easy that one is. You just have to be careful while you're reading. So let's put 5 votes, and then let's go over some review. All right, let's go over missing added in. Missing added in is when you have addition equation and you have a missing number in the middle of it. So right here we have 29 plus question mark equals 47. We're missing a number. That's why it's called missing added in. So a lot of people might get this one wrong because they see 29, they see 47, they see that addition sign, and they go ahead and they do 29 plus 47, and then they get the question wrong. The real way to do this is to subtract. Anytime you have a missing added in, you're going to want to subtract. And let's look at why you want to subtract. So let's pretend you have a box of crayons and you have 47 crayons in your box. So inside that box, in all, you have 47, but you have 2 groups of crayons. You have 29 broken crayons, but the rest of your crayons are new crayons. But we don't know how many new crayons you have. So the way to figure out that number that you're missing is let's get rid of all our broken crayons. Let's pretend we throw out all our broken crayons, and now we're only left with our new crayons. So the way we get rid of things in math is to subtract. So let's go ahead and subtract 47 minus 29. Right away, you should see 7 minus 9. You can't do it. More on the floor, go next door. So let's cross out your 7, cross out your 4. You're going to go next door to your 4. It's going to turn into a 3. And you're going to give that 10 to that 7 in the ones place. So now you got 17 minus 9 equals 8. 3 minus 2 equals 1, 18. Now we're going to go over the rest of these fast. They all are missing added in. So they're all going to have the same method of solving them. You're going to take your number at the end and you're going to subtract your one group, and that's how you get that question mark. So your next one is 62 plus question mark equals 82. Let's subtract 82 minus 62. It's going to give you 2 minus 2 equals 0. 8 minus 6 equals 4. Or 8 minus 6 equals 2, 20. And let's go over, you got 89 and you have 76 as your group. So let's get rid of 76. So 89 minus 76. 9 take away 6 in your ones place equals 3. 8 take away 7 in your tens place, 1, 13. And then your last one, 78 and 24. So you have 78 minus 24. Starting in your ones place, 8 minus 4 equals 4. And then 7 minus 2 equals 5, 54. All right, this should have been pretty easy because this was review. Tomorrow we're going to go over more graphing with your pictograph and your bar graph. We're going to put up a new poll to get new data. And then we'll go over some more missing added in and some other stuff for review. So we'll see y'all tomorrow.